Hello, everyone. Welcome to be the CEO of your own life. In this episode, we're going to be talking about a subject that has been really, I don't know, I want to say in my obsessive thinking, if that makes any sense.
Uh-huh.
And you guys are going to hear about it. Why? But I became a mom 3 years ago. The audience knows this. You don't know this, Andrea, but I became a mom 3 years ago. And like any parent, I've been thinking about better ways to parent, and I've read all the books. And when my son was about 18 months old, I read this book that said that children were better off to wait to be exposed to TV and any screens until the age of 2. And then I went on like the rabbit hole, just looking for more research or more evidence what would happen to their brains, because obviously I had already exposed him to some TV, and I just wanted to go into that. And so I learned a lot. But as he's 3 and getting really loud and active at restaurants, for example, and I see everybody pull their phones, something that I criticized heavily when I was not a mom. Now
hmm
that seems to be so tempting because it will just plug him into something. He'll be quiet, and I'll enjoy a nice conversation. You came across into my Instagram feed, and I was like, oh my god, everybody needs to know who Andrea Davis is.
Aw.
And so my hope is that over the millions of downloads that we have of this episode, everybody gets to hear from you and your mission and what you're here to do. So I will briefly introduce you, then I'll let you do the rest of your introduction. You know yourself better than me. But Andrea Davis is a former secondary teacher, secondary ed teacher, turned into a screen time navigator. Okay, this is why she's here. And she's the founder of Better Screen Time, where she shares family tested ideas from the tech trenches as a mom of 5. That's so impressive. Not only that you have 5 kids, but that you are really intentionally wanting to have a life without screens. And you could be the perfect mom to say, like, listen, I need this to help me parent. So thank you so much for being here, Andrea. Please dive into introducing yourself, and then we just talk about how to help parents have great conversations and a plan to have a, I guess, healthy balance with the use of technology and our children in the different ages.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Olga. I'm super excited to be here with you. And I remember those moments of being a young mom and just really wanting to be intentional about screen time. I think for whatever reason, it is just on some parents' radar. It's just one of those things that I feel like some parents just care about from the get-go. And it sounds like you and I are very similar that way. So my oldest just turned 18 a couple of weeks ago. And when she was just a couple of years old, so very close to the age of did you say you have a son?
Yeah.
Very close to the age of your son. I was visiting with a friend one day, and she is an avid reader. Like, she read so much. And I asked her, I said, what did your parents do to instill this love of reading? And she said, oh, well, we didn't have a TV growing up. And I was like, really? And I just got really curious. And I thought, no, I don't necessarily want to get rid of my TV, but what if we just used it like an appliance and we put it in the closet, and we'll just pull it out for family movie night and for the Olympics, like these things that we loved. And otherwise it's mostly put away. And so I went home and I told my husband, and he's a very practical person. He's an engineer and didn't really spend a lot of time watching TV anyway. And so he was like, great, that sounds cool. And so I know that wouldn't work in every home. My husband doesn't
No.
really love sports. So
Yes, I was
that
going to say.
helped a lot. I know we watched a lot of sports in my home growing up. And so that's definitely a different topic. But for us at that time, it completely worked. So that's what we did. And it wasn't that my kids never had, watched any TV or anything. We had a desktop computer out, so we would go get DVDs from the library. Again, this is showing my age, but this was like so convenient, right? Because you just got the DVD and you put it in and it ended. And it was just something that we turned to here and there, but it wasn't the main focus of our home. We would have kids come over and be like, where's your TV? And I just was at a point where I didn't even notice it. But yeah, kids would ask and I would say, well, it's in the closet. And they thought that was like the weirdest thing ever. Well, it's so interesting,
What
Olga,
did you
because
do?
yeah,
They'll be
yeah,
like, what?
years and years passed and we stuck with that. And it's interesting because we had a house fire about 3 years ago and lost most of everything in our home, and the TV was in the closet. And so when it came time to like rebuild our lives and rebuild our home, we ended up just getting a projector with a screen. So we actually don't even have a TV right now. So we just have a small house, and I didn't want that to be the focus. So that was kind of like where this all started many years ago. Again, it wasn't that my kids didn't use or watch TV at all. It wasn't like that. And it wasn't so much about the TV. It was just like, oh, I want my kids to be readers and to love books. Like that was my focus. And so fast forward, years later, and my oldest was in middle school. She was 6th grade, and we had a big cross-country move. We moved from Illinois to Oregon, and it was a really chaotic time for our family. We didn't plan on this move. My husband changed jobs, and it was really hard for my daughter because it's that age when friends are really important, and she was leaving friends behind. But then also it was a time when parents were starting to give their kids smartphones, and we were just confused, like, what should we do? And we had this leftover smartphone that someone had given us. And it seemed like a good idea to give that to her so that she could stay in touch with these friends she left behind, and so that we could get in touch with her because we didn't know anyone in this town that we were in. And so we handed over the phone. Again, no real experience or knowledge. I mean, we had smartphones, but we used them, I felt like at the time, pretty minimally. I didn't do a lot of social media. I didn't have it on my phone. And so I wasn't really thinking much beyond that. Well, fast forward like maybe 4 or 5 months later, my daughter came home from school one day, and she was spooning her after school snack, her bowl of cereal, in her mouth. And then she was doing this with her other hand, like scrolling. And I was like, wait, this used to be a moment when we would have a conversation and we would connect. And instead, she was sucked into this device. And I was like, this isn't okay. It's robbing her of her childhood. It's driving a wedge in our relationship. This isn't how it's supposed to be. And so after talking to my husband and making some decisions, we decided to take the smartphone away, talk to our daughter. We went back to a brick phone, like one of the ancient brick phones. And it was really painful. But, we just essentially apologized to her, and we said, we did not know or understand what we were giving to you. We didn't prepare you. We didn't prepare ourselves. So that really was the beginning of me starting Better Screen Time, and just realizing that, hey, parents need to know that smartphones aren't for kids, and that there's a lot of preparation that needs to go into this to prepare our kids. Even if we aren't giving them that, they're going to have access at school or friends' houses. And so there's just a lot that has to be done. And that's when I started Better Screen Time.
Well, first of all, thank you, because I do believe there is guidance needed. I used to work in child welfare. So you were a teacher. I was a social worker in child welfare for about 10 years. And although I haven't done it for about 10 years, I still get all the phone calls when people have random questions about their childcare or their children. And one that I get often is like, what do you do with screen time? And I'm like, I don't really know, other than like set some boundaries around it. I'm not the expert. And perhaps that's why you start showing up on the phones heard me talk.
Right?
You're gonna need to see Andrea a little bit more. And I actually have coached some of my clients on that very same issue that you just described. Like, I don't have a teenager, but he behaves like one. I call him my teenager. And I can already see he was on YouTube once. Okay. One time he was on YouTube. He's obsessed with dinosaurs. And he will have a meltdown asking for YouTube ever since. So I've explained to him it's breaking his head, because of the
Mm-hmm.
tantrum. And that's why he's not getting access to it. And I blocked it immediately. I'm like, look, like something within those videos that are short, like, and fast and colorful and all the things that they had, uh, made him focused on it. Like he's got Netflix, Disney Plus, he could be using, what he wants is YouTube. And so to me, that's alarming because that's a behavior I hadn't seen in my child. And also I have no idea what parts of the brain are operating in what ways that allow him to be, when they make chips, they make it with the exact amount of sugar and salt that will make your brain want more. You never have want to be
Yeah.
like, I'm fully satisfied. Like they know what they were doing, right? Like they knew how in the lab create the taste that will want to spark your brain to want more. Well, I think YouTube and not just, I'm not, not talking bad about YouTube. I'm simply saying this happened to my child, and that has made me really even more aware of what's going to happen when he's exposed to more things. So thank you for having created better screen time and educating parents. I think we all need to know what to do. I feel that we may have lost half the people when we said you put the TV in the closet.
Yep.
Yes,
I
I
always tell
know.
people, I always warn people, I'm like, I promise I'm not telling you to do that.
So we'll dive into this. I know my husband is a massive sport. But I grew up with a TV in my house, but it was not a thing my parents really like felt connected to. So we
Yeah.
didn't feel connected to it either until I met my husband. There's a TV on at all times in my house, it's like background sound. I think
Yeah.
he can't deal with the silence in the house because he grew up with like a TV on for sports and it's always on the
Mm-hmm.
sports channel. But I'm like, holy, unless there's a great hockey game, like I just, turn it off. I don't care. So I know that there will be those disagreements in between parents, even about screen
Yes.
time. So where do we start this? Like, what is the best way to start? Like, I also don't want any mom listening to us or dad feeling any guilt about how they've managed screen time up until now. You don't know what you don't know.
Yep.
We're about to educate you. So
Yeah.
where do we start, Andrea? Like a parent who is like me, a little bit concerned. Mateo hasn't developed any habits yet of needing the screen. He has an iPad that we call it the TV, the airplane TV, and it's got
Mm-hmm.
games in it and puzzles and stuff. And we literally only take it when we're on a plane because we travel 5 hours and he's 3. He
Mm-hmm.
can't move necessarily, so he's got games, puzzles in there. Tell us about this time around. We had one of the games you suggested for Christmas, and so he's like the magnetic pen and the magnetic thing that
Oh
entertained
yeah.
him.
The magnet. Yeah.
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about.
it's 2 years above his age, but he loved it. It entertained him anyways. People hated us because of the sound, but we
It's all
didn't
right.
care.
Yeah, it's worth
So
it, right? It's
yeah,
better than
totally worth it.
screaming.
No, and then he was like being super creative and being like, "I see a dinosaur." I'm like, "Well, good for you, kid."
I love that you did that. Yeah. Well, I think just like you said, it's really important again that we kind of set that guilt aside. And that's another reason why I always share the story of what I did wrong, because that's the thing. We're not all always going to get it right. And I fully understand that putting the TV in the closet is very extreme. And I'm never telling people to do that. I just really want people to understand where I came from, basically two
Yeah.
extremes. And
Mhm.
so I understand both, but I think the beauty of that is that I was able to recognize it when it happened because it was such a shift in our family culture. And
Mhm.
I think that, it's amazing that you recognize that your son, after being on YouTube, that his behavior changed, his mood changed, and basically was throwing what we call a tech tantrum. And that is essentially because, exactly as you said, this technology that we're using, especially on interactive devices like an iPad, they use something called persuasive design. And that is designed to keep us hooked, to keep us connected, to keep us wanting more, just like those chips that you were talking about. Such a perfect analogy. And that is no match for a child's brain. So a child's brain is still under construction. And we know that the prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain that's responsible for decision making, isn't fully formed until we're in our mid-20s. And so we really can't expect a young child, especially, but even an adolescent, to always make the best decisions on a device that is literally pulling them in, inviting them in, sucking them in. And quite often, what's happening with the interactive screens on like a touch screen is that it really is just increasing the dopamine in the brain. And so it's a reward system for the brain. So the brain wants more of it. And that's just so hard for a young child to be able to handle that and control that on their own. So where to start really is just starting with creating a family tech plan. And I know some people, I heard someone the other day say, forget the family tech plan, just like take your kids paddleboarding and hiking and all this stuff. And I am like such a huge advocate of that. And you will see me share like screen-free ideas all the time. But the reality is the life that we are living in now in the digital age, tech is everywhere. So we have to have a plan. And you have a 3-year-old, so this is going to look different than like me I've got 5 kids that are ages 18 down to 8. So we can really kind of have a conversation about this. But where it would start, like for you, would just be with your spouse or partner and kind of making some decisions together. And just like you said, we're not always going to agree completely, but it's just important to, like anything, compromise. And you can share the things that you've learned. And, anyone that's listening, share that with your spouse or partner about what this does to the child's brain. And if you want to get more info, a book that I highly recommend is called Reset Your Child's Brain by Dr. Victoria Dunkley. And she actually goes into the science behind why these screens can be so addicting. Have you heard of that book?
No, but Prime Amazon will bring it to me tomorrow morning. I'm gonna order right away because I think I recently took one of Tony Robbins' trainings, and he talks about what helps us make radical changes that once seemed difficult. Call that losing weight, stop overspending, or stop a habit that you might have built in. And he guides you through a lot of questions. And one thing that came up for me as to when I've made radical changes, what has been the success, like why did it help me succeed for a long time? And I thought this for myself, and then he shared as one of the common reasons that the brain will stay on a change is if you understand fully why it's better for you to drink water versus Coke. Like you might feel like you understand it. Like obviously one has sugar, one doesn't, might be your random your last answer. But when you fully understand, the more knowledge you have as to why the reward is on the other side of change, the more likely you're going to not only interject it, but sustain it. So for me, the more I understand about the impact of my child's brain or the benefit, the greater that reward is on the other side. And I'm sure for those of you listening, this might be helpful.
Yeah, that's spot on. I love that. And we have a discussion guide on Amazon called Creating a Tech Healthy Family. And I kind of go into that, I actually quote Simon Sinek and how he talks about your why, starting with why. And again, like a 3-year-old's not maybe going to quite grasp that yet, but you can do just like you said, like starting with simple things such as this isn't the best thing for your brain. Let's talk about what things are good for your brain and why. And so as a parent, not only do we want to think about the impact, the negative impact, but like, let's think about all the benefits of being off of a screen, right? So there's study after study that prove like really what kids need is just unstructured play. They just need to be able to play. And that includes messes and time outside and yes, parental involvement sometimes. And there's nothing wrong as a parent with needing a break. And really what researchers have found is that the better option of screen time is actually to turn on a slow moving TV show, because like you said, quite often on these maybe like shorter films, the scenes are changing quickly, the colors, all those things. And it really is like inciting that dopamine. But if you could pick something that's a little slower moving and that's, it just doesn't have the same effect on the brain, then that's a great way, like for you as a parent, okay, I need a break. Yes, I'm going to let them watch 45 minutes of, Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood or whatever that is for you that your child likes. And that's fine. Like taking that break once in a while. It's when Like if we're leaving Netflix on repeat or, other things, and it's just playing forever, then obviously that is, our kids have missed opportunities, the opportunity to just be a kid and to explore and use their imagination. And those really are the benefits of being a kid, and those skills that they learn carry with them. So again, like if you talk to any teacher, if they've been teaching for a while, they'll say, yeah, it just feels like kids definitely have a shorter attention span than they used to, and it's harder to keep kids engaged and keep them listening and than it used to be. And obviously there's always like going to be hyperactive kids, but like that's what kids do. Like that's why they need exercise and physical activity, which is another concern with screens, is just that then they're sitting for a longer time, they're not getting that energy out, and that's another reason why they're throwing a tech tantrums, because you've like hijacked the brain and raised the dopamine up to here, but then you've lowered their ability to get any physical activity out. And so it's just like this perfect storm, and they need physical activity, they need time outside, and there's just so many benefits to that. So yeah, I think we kind of went off on a tangent, but
this is great because I want people to read this book. I think this is a phenomenal idea to understand better. And I also love the idea of having this family plan. So do you have any suggestions on how we can come across creating this plan? What questions to ask you and your partner? Especially I'm thinking, like, I think of my sister who's got a 10 and a 12-year-old who are like, especially a 10-year-old boy, like he will play hockey on his phone, not phone, he doesn't have a phone, but on
a Switch
Nintendo
or
something.
Yeah.
And then he is one that I think will have a really hard time if a plan is implemented. So I'm guessing the plan has to include this process of transition, like you said, conversations with the child, for them to be on board and understand. I loved your apology to your daughter. We didn't know what we're getting you to, and we didn't prepare you. That's so beautiful, right? Like, because truly, one is the truth, and also you're not carrying a lot of guilt around it. You're just recognizing,
exactly,
what went wrong, how. And so for those who are listening with a 3-year-old or with a 10-year-old, but like, what will this plan look like? The creation of the plan.
So we have a quick guide to creating a tech plan on our website on betterscreentime.com, and you'll see it right on the homepage. But really, we keep it simple. We just talk about where, when, what, who, how long, and just deciding like, where will we use screens? And I know for us as a family, we decided, okay, we're going to use screens in shared spaces and spaces where everybody is. So no screens in the bedrooms or the bathrooms. And then we talked about what's okay. And again, this will vary depending on ages, and maybe you'll have different things for different kids if you have different ages in your home. So, where and when, like when is okay. Okay, we're not going to use devices at the dinner table, and kind of having those screen-free, just kind of almost like sacred moments or times when devices are put away and we're not on them. And I think dinner time is a really great one. And deciding maybe if there's other things. I know with young children, one of the things I had to learn was putting my own device in the charging station, so that when it was like bath time and it was bedtime and we're reading stories, I wasn't getting distracted by my device. And that was so important. And I think I had my own realization as a mom when I was reading Harry Potter to one of my kids, and my phone buzzed, and I grabbed it. And I think in my mind, I was thinking, I have to respond to this person right away. And we have to tell ourselves, like, okay, who really needs me right now, right? It's the person right in front of you. And so that tech plan is not just for our kids, it's for us too. And so it helps hold us accountable, so that where, when, what, how long, again, with like younger kids, you're going to be pretty much making that decision for them. But with older kids, it needs to be a conversation that we have together. So for example, like 10 and a 12-year-old, it's a great exercise in self-awareness, asking them, well, how long do you think is too long? Like, how do you feel if you have been playing hockey on the Switch for over an hour, do you notice any difference? Okay, well, if you play for 2 hours, do you feel any different? And then you kind of have to rein that in as a parent and talk about, hey, time limits do matter because we only have 24 hours in a day. And I tell parents this all the time that while technology has changed, what kids need has not. And so they still need sleep. They
Oh,
still
I
need
love that.
exercise. They still need to learn. They need to explore. They need face-to-face time, like real-time interaction,
Socializing.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then some people, were more introverted and need some quiet space and that. And I think that is one of the ways that screens get us is convincing us that, yeah, this is my quiet time, like with my screen, but it doesn't fulfill us in the same way that maybe a walk would, or journaling, or reading a book, or drawing, like other things that I think introverts use to fill their cup. I think quite often those kids and those people can tend to, and I know this for myself, can tend to think, okay, well, I'm having some time with my screen, but we have to really, it is, again, it's a conversation about self-awareness. And we have in our discussion guide that's on Amazon, we have a whole conversation about that you can have with your kids, but make that plan, decide together, and understand that it's like a living document. It can change, it can evolve because your family will change, technology will change. Put it on the fridge somewhere where everybody will see it. And that's super helpful as your kids get older and they start to question some of the boundaries, that we talked about. Then you can just say, hey, no, we talked about this and this is what we decided and this is why. Again, going back to that why. And they might push it, but again, as parents, that's part of our job, is to love and to stay firm on things that we know can really
Assertiveness,
impact our kids well.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I love this, and I was already thinking like, oh, that means change of behavior for me.
Yes.
And I think for parents, they need to think like, this is not just, we have the best intention for our children. I know I don't let my child eat sugar. Like his sugar intake is so reduced compared to most children his age. So I'm so self-aware. However, if he's not around, I'm going to eat all the sugar that I can possibly get.
Yeah.
Although I've got this thinking that sugar is so bad for you. And I can totally see myself at the table, having my phone, responding to emails, or like taking a photo, because I run a business that grows massively online. So, like I've convinced myself this is a need, or I must do this. And I love that perception of like, who really needs me right now? One of my 2023 goals, you'll be happy, is to be less on my phone. And so
I love that.
I moved a lot of what I was doing with my clients off the phone, and I have like even greater boundaries with my own, how I work, how I operate, so that I can do this goal. I just hired somebody to manage my social media. So I myself don't even have to be like that reason is not there anymore. Yes, it's gonna cost me more than doing it myself, but it's gonna save me time with my family, which like makes
it's just
perfect
worth a
sense
lot.
to me. So the parents will have to look in and notice their own resistance, right? And like I guess your why is gonna be very important, like why we're doing this effort.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think when your kids are young and little, it's easier to like get away with things is the best way to put it, right?
Yeah.
But for me, when we sat down to do this tech plan and we'd gone back to the brick phone with our oldest, my oldest was in middle school by that point, and adolescents are really great at picking up on hypocrisy. Like if you're saying something and doing something else. And that really was when I was like, okay, I'm done, not taking my phone or my laptop or anything into my bedroom or the bathroom. I'm following the rules too. And initially it really was just to help my kids. But then I realized, oh my goodness, I am so much better off not being on my laptop typing emails at 11 o'clock at night. Like I have some boundaries now around that. And I think, like you said, working from home, which I think even if parents aren't running a business, they are still using their phone to schedule appointments and play dates, and it never ends, right? When you're a parent. And so we're all working using our devices at any rate. And so we have to come up with those boundaries.
I teach boundaries. I coach people on boundaries. I'm a big fan of boundaries, but one of the enemies of boundaries is your logic
Mm,
fear-based, like, right, I'm going to miss on this, or they're going to be mistreated. Like, I know for some parents, they want their kids to have an iPad and an iPhone because they want them to fit in, right? Like, I don't want my kid to be the odd one. Say, I've got the personality that I don't care if my kid is the odd one. I'm going to raise him to have the personality to be the odd one and own it.
yeah, that's me too.
I'm like, so own it. You will be the
Yeah.
odd, and like, I want to raise a confident child at all costs, not like the one who wants to fit in at all costs. But I know I'm unique. I know, like, not many people think this way, will have the confidence themselves to be like, we can do this. So this will be a resistance of change. Now I'm thinking for my child, I'm like at the beginning. I can plant the seeds. I can start redirecting my own behavior. For those who are in the middle of it, where this is a problem, where they are actually concerned their child is spending, like, you, I love your words, is robbing them from their childhood, and the parent is realizing this, and they want to get along with them. They don't want to be the bad parent who shows up and says, like, give me all of your iPad, and now you're like, me, mom or dad. What is your advice to start intervening? Obviously, including them in the plan will be key. What does a parent have to know or to do or be willing to feel as they're you know um, interjecting change,
Yeah.
introducing change?
So we have two online courses. One is creating a tech healthy family. So it's kind of that foundation. And then we have one called Untangling Teens in Tech. And that's really, what we're doing, but you might need to untangle the tech even, with younger kids. And I think, again, it goes back to being willing to apologize, doing your homework so that you, like you said, really know your deeper why and why this is important to your family. And then you creating that family tech plan and doing it together. And again, that might start with an apology, like, hey guys, we've got to do this differently because the screens are taking over. And then list like what you're seeing. I'm noticing that we're not connecting, that I look around in the room and everybody's just on their devices and we're not talking, or we're not, doing our evening walk like we used to do. Again, I think being really specific about what you're noticing and say, hey, this includes me. Again, that vulnerability and willingness to
Mhm.
be accountable. But the I think the most important thing is to always nurture the relationship first. So if everything really does feel out of control and you feel like just taking the devices away the next day is not an option yet, I definitely think it's just important to start with that relationship and spending time. So that's one-on-one time, like going on one-on-one dates with your child or with your teen. That's something that we've always done. Again, it doesn't have
Not
to
to the
be.
movies.
Yeah, even if it's the movies. In fact, I'm teaching a 4-week live course right now with parents of teens. And I have told them, because that's the first step is just developing that relationship with their teen. And I'm like, even if that means gaming with them, do it.
Mhm.
Which, that sounds crazy and
A game
backward,
is a
but
game. Yeah.
you're meeting them where they're at. And that's
Mhm.
the important part. You're meeting them where they're at. You're investing in the relationship. You're taking an interest in something that they love. And then from that point, you're moving toward like, okay, we're going to start some conversations and create a plan. And, there's this family tech plan, but also with our older kids, once they start to have more access to devices, whether that's school or a family device, then they kind of need their own individual plan. And that's what I help parents of preteens and teens do, is like, how are you going to live your values both offline and online? Because you are going to have more access to tech, and let's decide, like, same thing, where, when, what, how long for you, what feels right, and let's write it down. And then as a parent, I'm going to commit to. So I think the place that most parents want to go to is just to go to like monitoring apps and cell phone contracts. And, it's not like there can't be a place for some of those resources and tools. But I think that creating a collaborative plan is always going to be more effective in nurturing that relationship for sure.
And for your child to understand the why,
Yeah.
like it comes from a place of care. like this is what is happening, and you might not see it. You're lending them your eyes from the outside in. And yeah, I I would imagine that's any conflict resolution. That would be the first approach, anyways, right? Like
Yeah.
to meet somewhere. What do we have in common right at this moment, and start there,
Yes.
and then start like noticing like how we would be better off. Something I do with my son is point out when he's having a tantrum, whether that's because he ate sugar or because he was on YouTube, is notice how that happened, like that awareness that happened. And I don't think young is too, or 3 is too young to help him become aware. Like we never see his behavior until you eat that. And so
Yeah.
that's the impact. How does that make you feel? And I love that you asked that about the teenage. How does it make you feel if you play 1 hour versus 2? Do you feel
Mhm.
tired or energized after? Do you feel like willing and wanting to talk to others, or do you feel like retrieving and just going to bed? Right? To help our
Mm.
kids really create that, what came first? Like, what was the consequence? What is the side effect of doing this one thing that I think I love doing, or in the moment I love doing, but then I feel this other way. I think that, well, I'm a mindfulness teacher, so anything that has to do with awareness, I'm like, yes, let's
Yes,
create some self awareness, because it gives you the decision power,
it
right?
does.
Like that,
Yeah.
then you can decide if that's how you want to feel.
Yeah. And you're making the decision ahead of time, which is, there's a lot of power in that, especially if anything that is, could be a vice or something that's going to draw us in. It's really important that we, yeah, make those decisions ahead of time.
Now we all have the moments at the restaurant where we really do want to have a conversation with people, or and so you suggested like slow motion screen time could be one thing. And I read your Christmas list, and I was like, yes, some things my child is definitely too young for. Uh, what sort of suggestions do you have for anybody listening, as ways of, getting that break, or having quiet time with
Mm-hmm.
their child, doing something like quiet time for the parent, but the child is doing something that is safe and that is not going to be, having a negative side effect on their developing brains.
Yes. So we have an article on our website, and it's like, I can't remember the title, but it's basically like 15 ways to reset and keep your child playing. And it really is geared toward parents of with kids, your kids' age, and those younger kids where you need something to do. So one of our favorite things has always been audiobooks. So I would turn on, we used to do the CD player. We still have our CD player, but like Disney has tons of books on CD on Amazon that aren't very expensive. And we would get some through like Scholastic as well. But now we have a Yodo player, which you might have seen on the guide, and it
Yep.
just has little cards. And my kids definitely always kept their interest longer if they had a book to go with it. So I'm usually always getting the book to go along. So for example, my 8-year-old, she
Yeah.
was sick a couple of weeks ago, and we had the book James and the Giant Peach. We had it on the Yodo player as well. And she sat like for 2 or 3 hours. And I know not everyone would do that, but she really got into it and she was reading along. And if they, you don't have the book to read along, then just finding something for them to do with their hands while they're listening. And again, this would depend on age, but like Magna-Tiles or Legos or Play-Doh or anything like tactile that they can like just kind of sit and play with while they listen. Cause it feels like it gives them some company again. And I think that's a lot of times that's what the kids are looking for. They're looking for connection. And as parents, we all obviously always want to try to provide that as much as we can, but we do have to work and we have
Yeah.
to cook dinner and do all those things. So in
Clean the
those
house.
moments, yeah, all those moments like turning on an audiobook and getting out some Play-Doh, something that if I did have to do work on the computer, I would plop my kid on my lap and I would say, let's pick out some coloring pages. Tell me what you want. And I would let them pick like, again, this is dating me, but this was like My Little Pony or, something like that. What did they want to print out? So we would go through and we would print out. And so I would print out like 3 or 4 coloring pages for them, maybe a crossword puzzle once they got a little older. But the coloring page one worked even when my kids were like 3. And we get out the crayons and they would sit by me while I was working and like, okay, you can do your work while I do my work here. And I think just using a timer too, because for little kids, it can feel like so long if you say, I just have to do this one more thing. And then we know what happens. And we have one more
Yeah.
thing we have to do. So even just using like a visual timer, we have one called a time timer. I don't know if you've heard of that, but
No.
it's also on Amazon, but it just shows the time visually. So like setting that to 30 minutes and being like, hey, use your coloring pages. I'm going to work for 30 minutes and then honoring that when the timer goes off. Okay, we're done. I'm shutting the laptop. We're going to
And I
go
feel that
do
my
this.
kid thrives with those things. Like we use Alexa to set a timer for bedtime.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we just say, Alexa, 5 minutes. He doesn't understand the difference between 5 and 3. Sometimes he argues, 3 minutes, not 5. And we're like, okay.
Right.
um, but he hears that alarm and he's like, uh-oh, starts packing up. He knows, okay, we're done playing. So I think that's a great one. I've loved your suggestions. I've used, like I said, a few of them, and I love them even more because I see what happens to his brain. He's like occupied. The magnet tiles, I cannot suggest them enough. This child
They're
will build
awesome.
a million things, and like he knew we're coming. We're in Florida right now. He knew we're coming here. I'm from Canada, so like
Oh,
we talk about Disney, and and he built up with the magnet house, Disney's house. He's like, Mickey's house. He's like, Mom, I made Mickey's house, which it looked like a castle.
oh,
I was
that's
like, that's
awesome.
so, and all the dinosaurs. He makes dinosaurs with them too. It's incredible to see their imagination go, which I get very excited to see. And I think technology has taken some of this from our kids, right? Like
It
their ability
definitely
to
has.
imagine, and it's giving them anxiety instead because that brain is on over like dopamine constantly. So needing that like something fun to happen all the time, or else they're bored and they're afraid
Yeah.
of boredom.
No, it's so true. And giving them opportunities to be bored and to figure out what to do. And I've just noticed that with my kids, if I just let them be bored for 10, 15, 20 minutes, they eventually figure something out. They find something to do. And, and even like just working with your kids too, like let's empty the dishwasher together and let's giving them something to cut with like a butter knife, something that's not sharp while you're making dinner. I think a lot of it too is just like pulling our kids into what we're doing as much as we can, because
Yeah,
that's how we're connecting. They're craving connection. And so we
yeah.
can't always give it every moment of every day, but we can do the best we can.
Okay, so let's go back to the suggestions for the restaurant. Or I was at the airport yesterday and I saw this child wanting to go for a walk. Obviously, she was strapped in her stroller. She didn't want to be there anymore. She wanted to go for a run, and nobody wants their child running at the airport as you're trying to check in. So this mom very quickly pulled her phone out because she knew this would be like it. And I was like, I understand, but fuck, what can we do instead? Like, what can we? So of course my son saw that. He's like, I want your phone. I'm like, thankfully, by accident, I left my phone back home. Like I've been phoneless ever since we got here.
Oh,
And
nice.
I've noticed everybody, and I'm so relaxed. My husband is way more stressed about it than I am. I'm like, I'm
Totally.
actually kind of happy. Like my wish of the year is coming to like
Yeah.
full. But I've noticed how many more people, like I think I'm more aware because I don't have that distraction, how easily I fell asleep like the last couple of nights, like without the phone,
Hmm.
and how many people are on their phones at a socializing event, like eating at a restaurant. So I think belongs to all of us, this conversation. We're all
Hmm.
attached to electronics. It's robbing us all from being in the present. But for those tattooing children who are used to having the electronic, those parents who are used to just having like I call it the soother of today, right? Like, oh,
It
child's
is.
crying, just give him this soother and he'll be fine. To the restaurant, like maybe the audiobook, I guess with ear pods, that could be one thing, but then they're not interacting and having like this social supper with you. I'm South
Yeah.
American, so
So,
that's big for me.
yeah.
What?
So I'm just like going to take everybody back and just pretend that you were a parent like 12 years ago, because those of us that parent at that point, you came prepared. You brought a bag that had activities for your kid, snacks, and sometimes you let, like, if you're at a restaurant and it's taking a long time for the food to get there, you go take your kid and you walk around and like go walk around even outside around the restaurant, because they're only going to be able to sit for so long. So it's like, one, understanding their limitations, right? And if you were looking for like a quiet date with your spouse or partner, get a babysitter. Like, don't
I
really
was
like
gonna
it.
say,
And it's just hard because
just
I've
bring
had
them.
parents that, again, like newer parents that never parented without a smartphone, right? Right. And so like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, if we're trying to have a date? And I'm like, that's when you get a babysitter. And if you can't do that, then you just, again, you could come prepared. Cause like we've had many years of being on a budget, not, years where we couldn't afford a babysitter. And so again, you come prepared and bring activities and just accept the fact that it's probably not going to be like this quiet, beautiful,
Like your
relaxing
norm,
experience.
exactly. No.
So lower your expectations for what the experience will be, but higher your expectations for yourself of like being prepared to help this child. And then again, if it's just like everything's if they really come apart and you really are in some kind of emergency, then maybe you do pull the phone out. But I guess I say this because I didn't have that option for so long. And then when I did, it was with my fourth, my son, I remember pulling it out and giving it to him and seeing the same signs that you're talking about. Again, no one was really talking about this. And I just had like 2 little apps. They were like a ABC app, again, educational, right?
Yeah, they exist
But
still.
but then I noticed, his behavior was just awful. And then he always wanted my phone. And so I remember talking to my husband and having this conversation. Again, no one was really talking about it. And we're like, let's just make mom's phone only, and nobody else touches it. And once I decided that in my head and communicated that with everyone, then he didn't ask for it anymore because I never gave it to him. And so I think that's the thing. It is just like you said, it's the pacifier. And so you have to kind of make that decision of how it's the role that it's going to play in your lives. And I think that it will be easier for your child and for you if you don't rely on it. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah. And I think we all get impatient with our children, whatever age, tantruming.
Yes.
I am a big proponent of growing tolerance for people having their emotions, whatever they are, like open space, and you have tolerance for your own emotions as your child is tantruming, because I think that is that lack of patience that makes us feel it's an emergency when emotions are like experienced for 1 to 2 minutes and then they're gone, unless want to continue to have them by choice, right? And that's that happens. So creating that tolerance, I think, is part of like that lowering of expectations, that also have that space to be like, somebody's going to be unhappy, I'm going to have feelings about that, and how can I be sort of like give myself permission to have that. I wanted to ask you specifically about like the negative side effects for those parents who might, like you said, you just brought it up to my awareness. It's true. Some people who are listening right now might have experienced parents hooked to their phones, heavily involved in technology, and them themselves becoming parents also, perhaps like just like, not having parented or remembering too much of their own parenting without technology. Could we talk a little bit more about the side effects other than drawing them from this experience and the moment and their childhood? What are some of the negative side effects of allowing our kids to have unlimited access to technology?
Yeah. So I think the big one is definitely limiting their imagination. And again, they're having missed opportunities. So when our kids are growing, obviously their brains are growing. And especially when they hit adolescence, their brains go through this pruning process where the brain decides what it will hang on to and what it will let go of. And, I'm not a brain scientist, so that's just based on the things that I've read as a teacher, what I learned about child development, but also what I've watched with my kids. And so it's just this beautiful time for our kids to learn new skills that they won't have the opportunity to experience or do ever again because of the amount of time free time that you have as a child. And I think that's also important, giving our kids that free time. They have this opportunity to build skills, to learn new things. Obviously, another huge risk is the risk we run of them seeing inappropriate content, and specifically pornography. That pornography is very rampant. It's just available everywhere on the internet. And you can put like all the filters and everything in place. And I do recommend that you use filters, but nothing is 100% effective. And so you run the risk, the more time that kids are spending on a device, the more opportunities there are for them to see pornography, but also to deal with cyberbullying, where they're interacting with other people who are perhaps really damaging your child and saying hurtful and mean things. I mean, they might see other harmful content, such as self-harm videos, things related to suicide, violence in general. And then we're also thinking about online predators. So there are people that hang out online. They don't go to the park anymore. They just look for your kids on any kind of chat or anything accessible where they can find them. And then they're grooming them online. So they'll pretend to be your child's age, and they will make friends with your child, and your child or a teen will have this online friend that they think is their age. And then they'll start just bit by bit getting information from them. What's their name? Where do they live? Again, that's a conversation we have to have with our kids about not sharing personal information online as much as possible. And then they might even ask your child, they might even say, "Oh, you're so pretty," or "You're so hot," or whatever. "Just send me a picture. I want to see what you look like." And then they might send them a picture back that's totally fake. That's not them, someone else, their age. And then here we are, like, developing this relationship. And what can eventually happen, which is super scary and does happen, is that a child or a teen might send a nude or a photo of themselves. And then this person will basically, they do something called sextortion, where they'll say, "Okay, if you don't pay me X a number of dollars, or do this thing, or meet me somewhere, then I'm basically going to share this photo publicly. I'll do this." They'll basically like a ransom, and they'll just threaten them with different things that they will do if your child doesn't follow through with those things. And so I think sometimes people think, "Oh my goodness, that never happens." Oh my goodness. Parents tell me all the time. And even older kids, teenagers, college students who, have sent pictures they wish they had never sent. And so again, that comes back to that conversation. I always tell my kids, just don't ever take the picture. If you don't take the picture, you don't have to worry about it getting sent. And again, that's another benefit of keeping screens out of bedrooms and bathrooms, because that's
They're less likely to get nude in front of you.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Right.
It sounds funny, but it reminded me of a documentary I saw on Netflix, I think, of this baseball player. I don't know his name, where he had a whole relationship. He would say, "This was my girlfriend," of this woman who was not even a woman, it was a man. And like then when they were at like 2 years, I think. This is a grown man.
Wow.
A baseball player. 2 years feeling like he was in love. His family knew about her. She would like speak on the phone with them. And when it came time to like they physically finally, let's meet. I don't even know how that didn't happen, but when that was gonna happen, the cyber bully, I guess, pretended that person he was impersonating died. And this guy goes into like full on depression, like his girlfriend died. And then finally this guy couldn't take it anymore, the bully, and confessed to him, "Actually, it's been me all along. I'm not a man, I'm a woman." Now I think now he's transitioned into a woman. Like there's a whole documentary on this, how a whole grown man can be lured into this conversation, have all these emotions, and this was all fake, really. And so for those of you who are listening and thinking, "My kid was never, my kid is smart, my kid is all enough, this wouldn't happen. Like, to me, that was the most traumatizing part of this whole thing. It was like, he was a grown man.
Yeah.
And now he's deeply depressed. He's not in playing sports anymore. Like, he feels shame. He feels all kinds of things that are coming up because of what he experienced. And people making fun of him. How come you were in a relationship for 2 years? You never met them. Like, the questions we all had to him are now feeling like I'm an idiot. How did I not know? There is innocent people out there. And there's those who want to take advantage of them. And our children are all innocent and naive.
Yes.
And you mentioned it, the frontal part of the brain is not fully developed until their mid-20s, which now that I think about it, this guy might have been right about there. So we don't think of consequences necessarily. They don't. That's why they make so many stupid decisions. that part hasn't been developed. So we as a parent or caregivers have to think of that, like help their brain as they're developing make better decisions, because they can't. They don't have the physical ability to do that.
So true. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's just really important that we talk to our kids about it, but we also let them know if something were to happen, come tell me. Like, I am on your side. I'm on your team. We're learning. We're all navigating this digital age together for the first time. So I think that's super important, is equally important, or maybe even more than, I would say probably the same, but like teaching your kids, but also making sure they know that you're a soft place to land and that you're there to help them. If anything were to happen, you want to be the first one to know.
Absolutely. Andrea, thank you so much for your time. We've come to the end of this episode. I think everybody should follow you on Instagram at the very least. I've learned a lot just from following you, and I'm so grateful that you agreed to come onto my podcast. Being a complete stranger, you were like, yeah, I'll do it. It talks about your commitment to this very important mission. So thank you so much. Where can people get a hold of you? What's your handle? We'll have everything on the show notes, but for those who are listening and want to just dive in right now, where can we get a hold of you?
So our website is betterscreentime.com. And then we're also on Instagram and Facebook as Better Screen Time. And yes, I am here to help. We have 2 online courses. We have a lot of free resources. Our quick guide that we mentioned is available at betterscreentime.com. I think that's a great place to start. And it was my pleasure. I really appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much. Well, everybody, head over to the show notes, download this, go into her website, download the form or the guide, and make sure to follow her on Instagram, because she will post cool things like a Christmas list that does not include technology. I was all over that. Oh, by the way, the Yodo thing that reads stories to your children has stories in different languages, and you can download your podcast in it. I know my son prefers to hear things in Spanish, so that I was happy to see that as an option. And they have lots of French stories and just other languages as well. So
totally love it.
All right, see you guys next Monday. Thank you, Andrea, again. Hello, my friends. Olga here. I'm interrupting your episode only to let you know of an exciting opportunity for you and I to work together this month. On May 12th, I am starting our next group of Reset Your Mindset, which is my 12-week coaching program that also has a teaching component of mindset. The registration is open as of right now. I am looking to having as many of you as possible who are tired of feeling overwhelmed, to being doubting yourself all the time and in overthinking mode. And if you're ready to just dive into your growth mindset, if you're ready to think differently without changing anything about your life, but suddenly having your life feel so much better, this is your chance. It starts May 12th and we end the end of July. These are the best 12 weeks that you can invest in your mind and in your well-being. Your money is guaranteed. So if at the end of the 12 weeks you did not or did not see any progress with your confidence, your overthinking didn't slow down, I'm going to give you your money back. So you have zero risk involved. Summer and spring are the best time to do some mindset work. So I'm not sure what's holding you back, but come join me. You can go to the show notes, you can sign up directly, but if you want to talk to me first, you can also book a complimentary call where you and I can just chat about your mindset goals, what's going on for you, and whether or not Reset Your Mindset is a good opportunity. Talk to you guys soon, and I really look forward to seeing you in there.